Hey class, welcome to Drafting 1101 CAD Fundamentals. And this week is mainly going to be teaching you about the AutoCAD software, getting started in it, doing a lot of simple things just to get you going with it. So when you install it and open it, now this video is with the 2023 version, so we're we're in the future shortly we're switching over to the 2025 version, so there'll be some difference in the way things look. I don't know what those are yet because I haven't seen it yet, but when you open, often here on the home page there's a list of recent files that you've been uh, working in. Over here on the side menu you can browse here to open, or you click here, you go to a new template. um, And if you just click new, it usually defaults to the last template that you opened, which can be a good thing, can can be the wrong template. So if we hit the pull down arrow and let's go browse templates, and it goes to the template folder in the AutoCAD install directory. And what we're going to mostly use, if if I don't give you a drawing to start with and a template to work in, it's going to be this one here, the ACAD template, which is just basic AutoCAD in imperial format or in inches. If you do one that has ISO, that's in a metric format. Okay, so let's go ahead and open the ACAD template. Okay, now I don't have very many modifications done to my software at this point. There are a few. But when you open it up, the drawings you have open will be in tabs across the top here, okay? The menu is here. You got a menu bar, and then you've got the panels, or the palettes, as they call them, across here. At the very top, you've got uh, the quick access toolbar, which has the big things like new, new, open, save as, and then some save to web and plot. Okay, so you can look across the different tabs here. Most things you do will be on the home tab. Annotate is where we have our text and dimensioning and center lines and things like that. But most everything will be here off the home tab. Now, let's look at down here in the drawing space. We're doing everything in 2D in this class. So when you have the view cube here and the compass, you should always be looking at the top view. Okay. On the side, you may have this little toolbar right here on the side that you can use if you so like. It's got, zoom and pan and things like that. Like, the pan changes your cursor to a hand. Um, let's go down here to zoom. It's kind of hard to tell without anything drawn, so we'll come back to those things later, okay? um, Here across the bottom, this is known as the command line because AutoCAD has lots of keyboard commands that you're going to be learning in this course. And anytime you start a command, whether it's with keyboard or with the icons or with the mouse, it will prompt you right down here what to do. Okay, and we call it the command line. It is possible to close it, but then you can, always reopen it. Down here, we've got some tabs. We've got a model tab, and then there are layout tabs, and the layout tabs are what we would call paper space. And this is the paper that your drawing would be printed on. And in the future, in some of the drawings that I'm going to give you, and then you're going to create one, there'll be a title block with a border and information on it. But this is what you would print if you were to print your drawings out. And we call it paper space. Okay, so we'll go back to model. Here, across the bottom down here, um, you've got a lot of tools right down here that we can use. Um, and yours may look a little different. So if you come all the way over here to the right and click on that 3 bars there, it says customization. These are the things that can be turned on and turned off across the bottom of the screen. And you can kind of look at these, change yours if you want to change yours to match this. Because the ones that we use, coordinates is in model space, these first 4 are good. Infer constraints, that's a maybe, but dynamic input, yes. These need to be turned on. And then at least, yeah, those need to be turned on too. So some we use more often than others. Okay, so the coordinate system, AutoCAD works everything based on an X, Y, and a Z coordinate. Okay, X is left to right. Okay, and then the Y is up and down, as you can see here. And wherever your cursor is located at, it shows the coordinates down there in that little box at the back. And of course, wherever the UCS, the coordinate symbol is there, well, it can move based on your screen, but it's normally at like 0, 0, the origin. Okay, there we go. But if I move, if you notice how that happened, if I move my, if I pan away from the origin, the coordinate symbol moves with me. Okay. We'll talk about the model button later. That switches from model space to paper space and back and forth. That's another way of doing it. Okay. But if you're on a layout tab and you click to go to model space, what happens is you activate a viewport. And this is a viewport right here, this heavy line. And if you can imagine, you got your paper that you're going to print on, and you cut out a rectangle in the middle of the paper, and you're looking through it. Well, that's what a viewport does, is you look through the paper back to model space. And normally, if we're in paper space, when we zoom and pan, we're doing the whole paper. But if we activate model space from the layout, now we're zooming and panning and drawing and editing in the model space. Okay. All right. AutoCAD has a grid, and it's kind of hard for you to see it on my screen with the recording with a black background, but you can see kind of a red line coming across here, a green line going up, and then there's a grid in there. It's easy to see here on the background. So if I were to turn grid off, it gets totally turned off. Okay, so I like to keep the grid on because it gives me something to visualize as I'm drawing and as I'm working. The next button over here is your snap mode. And if we look at these, let's look at the snap settings. And here's where we can make changes to our grid over here. So the grid spacing is a half of an inch, okay, in X and Y direction, with a major line every 5 lines. Okay. If I turn snap on, and my snap settings could stay the same as my grid, or I can change them here. So I'm going to say OK there. what it does is it forces my cursor to snap to the grid when I'm in a command. So I'm going to start the line command. And then as I move my mouse, you see the cursor snaps. It jumps to a grid instead of it being a smooth line coming across. Okay, so that can be helpful to you if everything you're drawing is on those same settings, or if you need to draw certain things that are on that same spacing. Turning snap to grid on can be useful. Most of the time I leave it turned off. Okay, the next one here, dynamic input. I recommend you leave that turned on, because as you see, when you're in a command, you get this little pop-up menu right there next to your cursor. Okay, if I turn off dynamic input, I don't have it now. I just have the command line. Okay, so I recommend you turn that on. Okay, next down here in our tools is the ortho mode right here. And what this does is it restricts your cursor to be horizontal and vertical. So when I'm drawing lines, if it's turned off, I can go, in pretty much any angle that I want. But if I turn ortho mode on, it restricts me to vertical and or horizontal. And this can be a really a great tool for when you're having to draw horizontal and vertical lines, because you can't be a half a degree off, which could happen if you're trying to draw it using your mouse to drag things. And the keyboard shortcut is F8 to turn it on and off. It's a little quicker than going down to click with the mouse. Next button over here is polar tracking, and this does pretty much the same thing, except for it's at preset angles. And so if I select this one, it's just like ortho mode. It keeps me at vertical and horizontal. This one would be every increment of 45 degrees. Okay, so let me turn that one on to demonstrate it. And so you can see I'm at 25 degrees there, but when I get closer to 45, it snaps and I get a projection line going out there. All right, so there's at 180. So you kind of get the idea on those. And you can choose any of the presets. The most common is the 15, because that takes into account most of the angles that we would be drawing. Um, a 30, a 45, a 60, those are the most common angles that we would be drawing. Okay, next button right here, we've got ISO mode, or ISO drafting. And what that does is it changes your grid so that we can draw isometric drawings. And if I turn it on, you notice the grid changed to a set of angled lines. So if you should happen to hit that button by accident and your grid and your cursor looks kind of funky, like one of these kind of projections here, just turn that back off. when we get into the 1103 class, we'll be doing isometric drawings and we'll be using it there. Okay. All right. So the next button over here is object snaps, and the button is turn on, turn off, but the pull down next to it is where you set all of your object snaps. Okay. And here they're just kind of turned on and turned off. If I go into the settings, you've got your object snaps right here. These are the main ones. Usually I leave these three turned on, and then intersection. A geometric center is just that. If you got an unusual shaped object uh, that's not a circle, okay, it will find the geometric center of it. Nodes are a point, and we can place those with AutoCAD, and it's called a node. But if you think of it as just a point there, the problem with turning nodes on is that dimensions, when you start applying dimensions to a drawing, it creates nodes where those dimension lines intersect the drawing. And so you could get a snap there that you don't really want. Quadrant is the north, south, east, west points of a circle or an ellipse or something like that. And in here we've got object snap tracking. And you just have to turn on a couple of these, especially the extension tangent. When we start drawing with circles and arcs, you can turn those on for sure, and you'll see how those are working. Okay, so it's an on and off to try it out. Line weight. Let me make a change here, and I'm going to select a couple of lines here and change the weight of those in properties. Now this is something that we normally don't do. We don't normally make changes up here to our line properties. We do it in our layer command. But I just did it to show you how this thing will work. So now it's turned off and all lines appear to be the same thickness. If I turn line weight display on, it doesn't show the actual thickness of the line, it gives you a relative thickness. So you can see as I zoom in, it pretty much stays the same thickness there. Okay. And once we start drawing with templates, we'll have line weights assigned to the different layers so that object lines will appear different from hidden lines and so forth like that. So it can be helpful. Most of the time I leave it turned off unless I need to see line weights, and then I would turn it back on. Okay. Annotation, the next 3-4 buttons here deal with annotation scale or showing annotation objects, and we'll cover those as we get into text and dimensioning. They're just here for right now, and I'm just telling you what they are. Okay, we will deal with them later on in the semester. Okay, the next one here, workspace switching. AutoCAD, you can set up different workspaces, and I've got these three because I had 2023 version installed here, and now I'm working with 2025. You're going to be using the drafting and annotation workspace until you create a personalized one. The 3D basic and 3D modeling is just that. It's for when you're working in a 3D environment. And everything we'll be doing is going to be 2D. So you're going to be working with the drafting and annotation workspace. Okay. And what it does is it changes your menus. Okay. Because in the drafting and annotation one, we're dealing mostly with two-dimensional commands and menus and things. When we get into the 3D ones, it will change over to that. And it'll change your view cube and things like that. And I just noticed that I'll tell you, I had to recreate the second half of this video because the first half had the second half had an audio problem. And since then I've installed a new version on my laptop, and I've brought over my my menu bars. So don't freak out about seeing the menu bars over here. What I want to show you now is how to access properties. And I've got it open right here, so I'm going to close the properties. If I select an object and then right click and come down here to properties, it will open up a palette, and I had mine docked on the side, but it'll be free floating when you open it. And this tells you what you've selected. And if you selected a couple of different things, it would, it'd tell you what all you've got selected. But it tells you the information about that particular object, what layer it's on, what type of line type, the color, line type scale. We'll be dealing with that as we get more into the coursework. But it gives you the geometry of it, where the X and the Y, where the start points and the end points are, the length and the angle. Now these are kind of important, because if you've drawn a horizontal line like this, your Y points should be identical. Okay, if your line is truly horizontal, so my Y at the start and the end are identical. If it were a vertical line, then my X points, the start and the end of X, would be identical. Okay, now the length is just that, it's the length of the object. The angle is the angle at which the object was drawn. Okay, from start point to end point. And in this particular one, I started it here and drew it to the left. So it says it has a direction of 180 degrees. Because in AutoCAD, 0 degrees is to the right. Okay, so if we look at this line here, it has an angle of 45 degrees. And in properties, think of angle as direction as opposed to the actual angle. So it was drawn from this lower left point to the upper right point. That's a direction of 45 degrees from 0 point, from the right side. So the properties is, I use it a lot because I'm often checking drawings and in grading, and so I keep properties open on the side of my computer. If you find that you need properties often, when you get it open like this, just drag it over to the side until it docks, okay? And if you leave it like that, it'll stay open all the time. If you click this little arrow, it will collapse until you hover over it, and then it will expand out. Okay. I think that's everything that was to be covered that my audio messed up with on the first recording. So yeah, basically I was just explaining the AutoCAD screen and the menu to get you started. And the next video should pick up and work just fine.